Within hours of taking office, President Donald Trump announced a freeze on all foreign assistance.
We
don't want the children blown up by the landmine.
By March, the world's leading donor country slashed nearly 90% of its foreign aid programs.
We need to focus on our poor here, our people that do not have jobs, our industries that have been decimated.
Will the US lose soft power in Southeast Asia by withdrawing aid?
I'm sure that the autocrats in Beijing and Moscow and other parts of the world are cheering.
And will countries still see Washington as a reliable partner?
We should not be complacent given the capacity for shocks and immediate decisions, especially under Trump.
Here in the province of Siem Reap, Cambodia, the fields still whisper of war.
គ្រាប់មីនដែលដាក់នៅក្នុងចម្ការមីននេះគឺចាប់ពីឆ្នាំ1981ដល់ឆ្នាំ1988ទំហំផ្ទៃដីសរុបនៃចម្ការមីននេះមាន 1,704,35 ម៉ែត្រការ៉េ
There are estimated to be 4 to 6 million landmines and unexploded ordnances in Cambodia. Now, it is up to deminers to take on the harrowing task of clearing these explosives.
យើងត្រូវកាត់ព្រៃសិនកាត់ព្រៃម្ដង 50 សង់ទីម៉ែត្រពេលដែលអ្នករាវមីនឃើញអាមីននោះយើងភាគច្រើនវាមិនបានឃើញក្នុងភ្នែកទេព្រោះវានៅក្នុងដីឬក្នុងសម្រាមណា
Cambodia has one of the highest concentrations of landmines in the world. They were laid during the Vietnam War and later the civil war between the Khmer Rouge and the Cambodian government. Yet more were planted when Vietnam entered the fray to oust the Khmer Rouge.
ចឹងយើងលើកឈើក្រិតមួយទៅដាក់កន្លះម៉ែត្រខាងមុខចឹងបានយើងចាប់ផ្ដើមរាវពេលដែលរាវអត់មានឮសំឡេងឬក៏មីនអ្នករាវហ្នឹងលើកឈើក្រិតមួយទៅផ្គប់មួយគ្នាដើម្បីភ្ជាប់នេះហើយយើងកាត់ព្រៃបន្តទៅទៀត
The Cambodian Mine Action Center, or CMAC, is the largest of 4 national mine clearance operators in the country. Over 3,400 personnel are hired in this sector.
We released over 3,000 square kilometers, around 72% achieved by this organization, by CMAC. And we found and destroyed over 4 million landmines and UXO in Cambodia, together, all together. And how many less, no one knows exactly.
Former Prime Minister Hun Sen had set a goal to make Cambodia mine-free by 2025. The country had previously extended the target twice, from 2010 to 2019 and 2020 to 2025. This February, the deadline was pushed once again to 2030. One reason for the latest delay? The demining operations had been partially funded by the US, funding that was cut this January.
The US is like number 4 in terms of the funding. I mean the size for CMAC. We have received around 1.6 to 2 million US dollar a year. But in Cambodia as a whole, the US also fund over 10 million. It's almost like number 1, number 2 for Cambodia as a whole.
Donald John Trump.
January 20th, President Donald Trump is inaugurated. Within hours of taking office, President Trump announced a 90-day freeze on all US foreign assistance. An executive order cut programs by the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID. It is the main agency for foreign aid, dispersing 65% of US foreign assistance. The State Department is responsible for another 24%. A review of foreign assistance programs was conducted over the next 6 weeks for efficiency and consistency with US foreign policy goals.
USAID, was created by President John Kennedy back in the early 1960s. And he recognized that development was part of American foreign policy. Development in showing that the U.S. was interested in committing in helping countries grow, helping countries prosper, helping countries build an economic platform, especially for lower income people. That certainly benefited the United States in terms of its competition then with the Soviet Union. This was also not about just doing the right thing, but about making America stronger.
The USAID is the world's single largest donor of aid. Last year, the agency alone provided $32 billion to 165 countries. 9 of the 11 countries in Southeast Asia are beneficiaries. Funds are channeled through multilateral institutions such as the United Nations and World Bank, as well as contractors and NGOs. As for Cambodia, it received $3 billion from the agency over the last 3 decades.
U.S. assistance mainly focus on education, environment, health, demining, and especially human rights, rule of law, and good governance. I don't think that any country that can replace this role played by the U.S.
As for the demining operations, Washington funds the CMAC through a third-party organization via the State Department. A cut in funding would be devastating for its operations.
I received that call to close down on Saturday, 25th, as in Cambodia, and take us around 10 days or so to clarify what we should do, what we can do, and send some stuff at home and keep, let's say, team leader safeguard of their equipment and so on, and tell the communities that not enter the areas that we not yet complete our clearance. And so we don't want the children blow up by the landmine or youth.
Remnant explosives continue to claim lives. Though numbers have come down significantly, in total, more than 9,000 casualties have been recorded since 1998.
My fear that time, but the first time I feel I want to die, I want to die better for living, because no way for me how I can earn money, how I can work, because I lost my leg.
59-year-old Sem Savantha was a soldier in Prime Minister Hun Sen's government after the fall of the Khmer Rouge.
And then 1990, I was by step on mine. Yeah. When I step on mine and the mine explosive, I'm jump me. I think that about in the stream there, and then I fall down. And when I fall down, I get up. I would like to walk, but cannot walk because my leg gone.
Today, Savantha sells handmade souvenirs to raise funds for other persons with disabilities. Meanwhile, the undiscovered mines remain a risk.
We lost 2 deminers earlier this year on the 16th January 2025 by anti-DEI landmine.
The Trump administration's foreign aid freeze comes as the government pursues an America First policy. It accused the USAID of wasting and abusing taxpayers' money.
USAID has a history of sort of ignoring that and deciding that they're somehow a global charity separate from the national interest. These are taxpayer dollars.
I mean, President Trump has an America First agenda. And no, development is very hard to say. Giving aid in Laos, in Cambodia, across Southeast Asia, helps families in the United States. It helps the United States. And that's why USAID and development is so easy to go after politically in the United States.
Several days after the cut, food and life-saving assistance was reinstated. Other groups must submit requests for a waiver. The organizations supporting CMAC successfully applied for this, and funding was restored. For now.
We are very pleased to hear that they released their funding and our waiver is granted. But we still not sure for the future.
While the CMAC was lucky, not all waiver applications were successful. By March, 5,200 out of USAID's 6,200 programs were eliminated.
Through the U.S. assistance to the kingdom and to other countries in the world, the U.S. influence has been expanded. But when it comes to the freeze of this kind of assistance, I think most people feel very skeptical about the role played by the U.S., about the positions that the U.S. will be upholding. So I think this will more or less have a negative impact to the U.S. image as a whole.
Belief in America as a force for good has fallen. According to 26 out of the 29 countries surveyed by Ipsos in an April poll. As the U.S. withdraws, its rival could be poised to fill the gap.
If you look at the number of funding we receive from China, around $4.4 million a year. And the Chinese government have a 3-year commitment to CMAC since year 2003.
China has played an important role in humanitarian sector as well. You can see that during the COVID-19, China has sent a lot of vaccine, COVID-19 vaccines, medical team, medical equipment to Cambodia, and it also play an important role for post-COVID economic recovery.
The Chinese strategy or approach thus far has been very much about BRI, loans and investments. So it's not clear yet what the Chinese will roll out. If they do intend to do this, it will also depend on the willingness of regional countries to accept it, what the terms are going to be.
A 2024 report by China's Ministry of Commerce put the annual average amount of Chinese aid from 2013 to 2022 at $3 billion, a tenth of what America spends on international assistance every year.
The USAID gap, without that funding, there isn't going to be a replacement for it. Other countries right now are going through economic recession as a result, in part, of the trade war that's occurring between the US and China. Will China step up more than it is doing? I mean, on the margins, maybe. The Japanese have been extraordinarily beneficial in terms of the aid and development they have been doing in Asia, in particular in Southeast Asia. Doubtful that Japan is going to be able to give more.
As Washington risks losing soft power in the region, is its reputation as a leader of democracy and human rights also in jeopardy?
Kene awada pene hadi ye na chiri mona nya body ye do pa mo do pa la dia awada hene po lo ko bi ara ti ko da ta da ba go ban dia ko lo ta mu ku ba da ta di ta ya o ko ta da awada le bo ko tho cho tho ko ga ji sit ko ne ta nyo mo.
Saw Klu Tho fled war-torn Myanmar in 2006. The father of one has lived in My La refugee camp in Thailand for the last 19 years. It is the largest of 9 refugee camps along the border of Thailand and Myanmar.
So there's approximately 108,000 currently in the refugee camps along the border. Many of them have been there for decades.
When Klu Tho fled, the Myanmar military was embroiled in a decades-long conflict with ethnic minority groups. He is Karen, a group of people living in the south and southeastern part of Myanmar. Initially, when the Mela camp was set up in 1984, it housed some 1,100 Karen refugees. But since the coup in 2021 and the subsequent war between the Myanmar military and ethnic armies, numbers at the camp have swelled to 30,000. The various refugee camps along the border receive humanitarian assistance from international NGOs. Healthcare is provided by the International Rescue Committee, or IRC. It runs medical facilities across 7 camps. The US government was set to fund 42% of the IRC's original 2025 budget. So Se has worked as a medic in the IRC clinic in Mela camp for 5 years. He has agreed to speak to us under conditions of anonymity.
La April. Từ nó phải học bài này này bắt tay khởi cái mà đó bắt tay khởi cái là đi ở đó có chỉ đôi chỉ vào là ASEAN mà chơi vào mà.
Between 2023 to 2024, the US contributed $35 million to the IRC. This amount funded food and fuel assistance as well as healthcare services. When the US announced a freeze on all foreign assistance, IRC's clinics were suddenly shut. When the camp clinics shut, refugees who needed urgent treatment sought help at Thai hospitals, like the Tha Song Yang Hospital, 30 minutes away from the Mela camp.
We cannot take care of complicated cases because if we don't have enough specialists, because the number of staff is arranged by the government. They come only for Thai people. So if foreigner and the migrants, they come to our staff, we need to figure about the budget and the number of staff also.
While Thai nationals receive subsidized treatment at hospitals, refugees do not. This means that Thai hospitals must cover the medical bill for refugees if aid organizations cannot. But over 13,000 kilometers away, in America, such aid funding raised an important question, especially among President Trump's supporters. With millions of Americans incurring healthcare debt, why should the US continue to foot the bill elsewhere?
For many years, the American people have graciously supported and cared for the world with USAID. And President Trump wants to reassess USAID. He doesn't want to remove USAID. He wants to reassess it because the American people need help too. The American people need support in healthcare. They need support in floods and famines and the storms that we've had here. They need to be able to rebuild their lives.
But aid for organizations like the IRC goes beyond dollars and cents. It aligns with the image America has cultivated as a champion of human rights.
From the mid-1970s onwards, there was a decision by the various different US governments to promote human rights. It's important to understand that this grew up with the growth of the international human rights treaties and covenants that were passed. Back in 1948, I mean, it was Eleanor Roosevelt who played the sort of leading role in the committee that created the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
The document sets out a common standard for fundamental human rights and freedoms. It was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly and serves as a basis for national constitutions, laws, and treaties.
But the important thing was that from really the period of President Jimmy Carter, there was an agreement, a bipartisan agreement, that U.S. foreign policy should reflect U.S. values, particularly where it involves civil and political rights. And the explanation was that rights-respecting governments that are democracies are more likely to be partners and friends of the United States than rights-abusing regimes and single-party dictatorships.
Well, part of what helps the United States is what some people might call brand America. It stands for freedom, it stands for personal liberty, it stands for choice, it stands for democracy, it stands for rule of law. And look, the United States is not perfect. The United States has never been perfect. The goal was always to be better and to be on that journey.
In 2016, Congress passed the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act. This allows the US to impose sanctions on foreign persons who violate human rights. Since 2017, it has taken action against 500 individuals and entities, including the Myanmar military regime for its treatment of the Rohingyas.
It's important to understand that the US government, or at least in the previous administration, there was a belief that actually US foreign policy should reflect the US recognition of human rights and civil liberties.
But for critics, the suspension of aid has reversed brand America, and with it, America's moral authority to chastise others for human rights violations.
They have shredded the decades of US reputation that was built up, the so-called soft power that people are talking about, where the US government does things because it's part of a system of friends and alliances around the world that are actually interested in making the human condition better. That's all gone.
In a March Pew study, 45% of Americans disapprove of ending most USAID programs, compared to 35% who approve. However, a majority of Americans want to pay less attention to problems overseas so as to focus on problems at home.
Here in the United States, we have many people out of employment. President Trump wanted to put America first, and I know that that's a harsh thing to say, but at some point in time, we need to focus on our poor here, our people that do not have jobs, our industries that have been decimated. $36 billion is the budget for USAID. All of that being executed and used around the world and not focused on the American people. So while President Trump has frozen it, he hasn't eliminated it. It's not going to disappear. Some of it will disappear, but it just needs to be reallocated in a way that will be supported by the American people. If we can get it down to healthcare, if we can get it down to women's care, if we can get it down to hospital care, that is the type of USAID support that we should be giving around the world on behalf of the American people. The American people would highly support that.
As for Mela Camp, 2 weeks after shutting its doors, IRC's clinic started running again. It said the State Department had granted the committee permission to resume some services until the end of April. Apart from life-saving relief, Washington also delivers foreign aid to militaries abroad. Will a funding cut threaten the security of its oldest ally in the region? The annual US-Philippine joint military exercise ended in May. It is known as Balikatan, a Filipino word for shoulder to shoulder. This year marks the 40th iteration, with more than 14,000 American and Filipino soldiers participating in the drills. For the first time ever, this year's exercise combined command and control drills by headquarters staff with field training exercises.
So all of this that you're seeing here is a culmination of all of these efforts. What we're looking at here is really an exercise verging into a full battle test, which means we are now treating the exercise as a rehearsal for our defense.
Ties between the US and Philippines have strengthened under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Meanwhile, tensions have escalated between China and the Philippines in the disputed South China Sea. This body of water is also called the West Philippine Sea by the Filipinos.
President Marcos Jr.'s foreign policy is highly centered on enforcing at least the Philippines' position as a stakeholder and a stabilizer in the Indo-Pacific's rules-based order. And clearly there's a convergence of interest between the United States and the Philippines to enhance the alliance towards serving as a factor in the security of the overarching architecture of the region.
You have seen all the coercive and aggressive actions done in the West Philippine Sea. But I would say that all of these would remain under the threshold of conflict, below the threshold of conflict. Dati-rati, may mga water cannoning incidents. Mayroong mga laser pointing. Ngayon wala naman. Dati-rati may mga illegal maneuvers, nudging, bumping. So hindi ko masabi na lumalala. Ang masabi ko, yung kanilang presensya ay naandun pa rin. And hanggat andun yung presensya nila na illegal, anything could happen.
The Philippines is the largest recipient of US military assistance in the Indo-Pacific. Washington has provided over $1 billion to Manila in the last 10 years to modernize its military. Last July, the US pledged an unprecedented $500 million to strengthen the Philippines' military capabilities.
New steps to strengthen the alliance, a once-in-a-generation investment.
When President Trump announced a freeze on all foreign assistance in January, however, this amount was in question.
The aid freeze, I view it as a normal action by any government coming into power. So it's as if you're saying that let's take a step back, let's assess, let's audit, let's see where we are, and we would like to go. Sapagkat yung AFP at yung DND naman, we don't rely solely on what our partners or treaty ally extend to us. We have our own modernization program, in fact the most robust in history. So hindi mo tayo kinakabahan pa ganon.
Come February, the US exempted only $336 million from the freeze. Later, the full sum was restored when US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visited Manila in March.
In the military, we thrive on plans. We do a lot of planning. So we were not concerned, we were not alarmed, because in the first place, it was only the beginning. If that became final, we have our contingency plans. The foreign military sales for foreign military aid is not even the primary source for our modernization.
Well, I wouldn't read too much into that, given that it is just the beginning of the Trump administration, and we are seeing more areas where Washington is able to commit to the Philippine defense development, right? So we have yet to see how this would eventually play out, but we should not over-exaggerate this shift to the point that it would taint or define the alliance in itself.
For the US, the Philippines sits in a strategic position in the Indo-Pacific.
Well, the Philippines, geographically speaking, is at the heart of the Indo-Pacific, and if you look into the Philippines in maritime Southeast Asia, it serves as a critical gate in order to ensure that China does not push through the first island chain consisting of the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, Indonesia, and to an extent South Korea. So in that regard, the Philippines' position, especially as it seeks to stand up against China's expansionism, complements, of course, the whole idea of the United States in ensuring that the rules-based order remains intact.
The Indo-Pacific strategy was introduced by President Trump in his first term and later expanded under President Biden. It aimed to advance American influence in the region.
Thank you very much.
Apart from the Philippines, the US also disbursed large sums in foreign military financing to Taiwan and Vietnam. Last year, Taiwan received $1.5 billion, while Vietnam received $100 million.
The Indo-Pacific strategy is centered on, first of all, enhancing U.S. presence and also leveraging on U.S. like-minded cooperation and alliance networks to deepen and broaden them to ensure stability in the region. And the Indo-Pacific strategy also centers on improving the capabilities of friendly countries.
Despite this, the first 3 months of Trump's second term saw Washington take a different tack with allies. This February, he blamed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for drawing out the war with Russia and halted military aid. This is a reversal from the Biden administration, which poured billions in economic and military assistance to Kyiv. President Trump has threatened withdrawal from NATO. He also would not commit to defending Taiwan.
So I don't want to put myself in that position, but I can tell you what, I have a great relationship with President Xi.
Where does that leave the Philippines?
Well, I do not think that the United States under President Trump would derail the momentum behind the US-Philippine alliance because it also benefits the United States. You know, the America First, if you look into the declassified Trump 1.0 Indo-Pacific strategy, the US-China power competition remains front and center. And today, given the largely competitive nature of the Indo-Pacific geopolitics, at least we could expect some sort of continuity rather than a complete derailment, worst comes to worst.
But there are those who worry about the Philippines' continued dependence on the US under the mercurial Trump administration.
If you look at how Trump, in his first term, he was not very supportive of the Philippines. Also, as always, the Philippines being too dependent on US military support and defense, particularly in the region, we rely too much. It's a big embarrassment, in fact, and I'm sorry to say that. And that's why we have never been able to truly modernize or really strengthen our capability in terms of defense.
We cannot be too reliant on one power, but we see, of course, that the partnership is benefiting the Philippines for its security interests. But of course, we should not be complacent, given, of course, the capacity for shocks and immediate decisions, especially under Trump. But nonetheless, we are willing to maintain a multi-aligned approach. Manila is willing to maintain a multi-aligned approach, but we seek to maximize what we can from our growing partnership with Washington.
Our exercises are now what used to be bilateral and now multilateral. We had the reciprocal act agreement signed with Japan. Australia is now a strategic partner. We are looking at New Zealand, Italy, France, UK, Canada, and more. So we could see that the current administration has provided the impetus for the defense establishment to up the ante of defense diplomacy.
After 100 days of Trump's second term in the White House, will America's aid and influence in Southeast Asia change? For now, military assistance appears safe for the Philippines, yet other areas have been slashed. Three years ago, this waste management facility opened in Pasig City, part of the Philippines' national capital region. It was built with funds from USAID.
Dahil nga alam natin na itong mga plastic na to eventually ay hindi naman natutunaw at napupunta rin sa mga isda, mapupunta rin to doon sa mga idideklag natin na mga rivers natin at nakakadagdag para doon sa baha. So nilayon ng USAID ng isang programa para magkaroon ng isang recycling facility ng mga plastic.
Waste management is crucial in Manila, one of the world's most densely populated cities. The 14 million peso grant to build the eco-hub was dispersed by Green Ants Builders, a company that turns plastic waste into construction materials. The firm faced problems with USAID soon after the factory was built, causing the eco-hub to shut down last year.
Pero dahil nga pending yung sitwasyon namin ay almost 13 employees ang naapektuhan at 2 lang ngayon yung nag-duty dito sa eco-hub. Yung mga namin, yung mga electric vehicle namin, subject na siya para palitan na lahat ng gulong, lahat ng makina rin nila. Kasi almost 1 year na rin na naka-stock yung mga gamit dito.
Apart from humanitarian efforts, USAID funds over 300 green initiatives throughout the world. And these in particular have come under scrutiny by the Trump administration. During his first term in 2016, President Trump rolled back actions on climate change.
Withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty.
When his second term started, he removed the US from the Paris Climate Agreement, a pact among nations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Domestically, he also called for a freeze on funding for clean energy projects and fast-tracked coal, oil, and gas production.
Meron na kaming instruction na bukod sa tapos na yung program, hindi kami pwedeng maki-involve as USAID project implementer dito sa eco-hub. May kasabay pa kami sa Parañaque, sa Las Piñas, at alam kong ganun rin ang nagiging problem nila ngayon, yung sustainability ng program. Dahil pag hindi namin tinuloy-tuloy yung plano for eco-hub, maapektuhan yung basura talaga namin. At ito yung sagot wala pa kaming nakita sa buong Metro Manila.
Environmental protection is not the only casualty. The diversity, equity and inclusion, or DEI agenda has also taken a hit.
President Trump ran on a platform of eliminating DEI. Now, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a very large subject in the United States with regards to hiring, with regards to policies, with regards to gender, with regards to sexual orientation. I think you can see under the first few weeks that he wanted to make sure that women only were playing women's sports. That's a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue. He wanted to make sure that in the armed forces that you were hired on merit, what your qualities were or what your strength was on your actual merit to be able to pass a test, not have policies be changed because of your skin color or your sexuality.
So, in Trump's first week in office, he signed executive orders to halt DEI initiatives.
This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life.
If he's making those policies in the United States, he's going to implement that with USAID policies as well. We all have different positions on them, but President Trump's position is he doesn't want DEI being pushed on behalf of the United States in countries around the world because it's not our job to do that.
However, in Southeast Asia, where women and minorities are sometimes marginalized, DEI goes beyond quotas. So, the aid cut could affect programs involved in education, job creation, and healthcare for women, such as the former Diversity and Inclusion Scholarship Program, which sent marginalized students from Myanmar to study in universities across Asia.
When it comes to saying that we need to be focused on gender equality from a development perspective, especially where a lot of governments in the region do need to do more in terms of women and children when it comes to education, when it comes to finance, to prevent them from being trafficked. All of those things that USAID did, those were very good and important things to do, but that got caught up into this anti-wokeness and this political discussion in the US. And that's why USAID, in a way, was so very easy to go after and to eliminate in large parts.
Southeast Asia received $860 million worth of US foreign aid in 2024. Beijing previously accused Washington of using foreign aid to interfere with countries' affairs and undermining stability in the region.
Quite clearly, I'm sure that the autocrats in Beijing and Moscow and other parts of the world are cheering. They can't believe that Donald Trump has basically unilaterally disarmed the United States in the course of 2 months. USAID, which was in some ways part of the best of the US government going overseas, walking away from that shows a degree of cynicism that is really, really hard to understand as an American.
The gap left by USAID in Southeast Asia has given China an opportunity to fill. This March, Beijing announced a partnership with UNICEF to promote education, nutrition, and hygiene for children in Cambodia. Washington had cancelled 2 projects related to these causes in February. China was also quick to send over 600 rescuers and more than $150 million in humanitarian assistance to earthquake-stricken Myanmar in March. The US pledged $9 million.
It would benefit China if the US loses the ability to influence governments, to influence populations. It's not that China gains so much, it's that the US loses. And then the US will not be dealing with governments that are more inclined to that global rules-based system that exists today.
But there is another argument. For the most part, ASEAN as a region has prospered in the last decade. Some observers say it should wean itself off American aid.
You know, there is a discussion between all of the Southeast Asian countries, ASEAN countries, that ASEAN wealthier countries have the ability to go in and help not the same wealthier countries on immunization programs or other things along those lines that USAID would have done.
Between 2015 to 2022, the Lowy Institute found that intra-regional aid stood at $633 million. This made up just 0.25% of assistance which flowed into the region. President Trump has often accused countries of cheating the US in trade and military aid.
How much do countries take advantage of the United States? How much has there been too much free riding? The answer is there has been too much. President Trump was right about this. He was right about this in his first term. Why is it the United States is putting in so much more funding into an organization like NATO? Why aren't European countries spending more on their defense? Now, when it comes to development, that is different. The amount of money the United States spent on development in USAID was an extraordinarily small part of the US budget. And the countries and the governments here, many of which don't have the ability to spend like those countries that make up NATO.
As for the shuttered eco-hub, they are turning to the Philippine government for funding.
Sa totoo lang, kahit naman yung barangay lang ang magsuporta dito, kaya naman namin with the help of city government. Pero syempre, iba pa rin yung merong kang added value . Pag sinabi mo yung program mo, it's funded by USAID, merong dagdag na value siya.
The Center for Global Development has calculated the estimated cuts to USAID programs based on the list shared with Congress. An average of 8 in 10 USAID programs in Southeast Asia were cancelled. What will it ultimately mean for US engagement in the region?
We are democratic partners with many countries in Southeast Asia. We are defense partners with a number of countries in Southeast Asia. We are trading partners, some of the biggest trading partners in their country. When you talked about our image with regards to USAID in the countries, it could be damaged. But on a general scale, we have tremendous relationships with all of Southeast Asia, unrelated to USAID, that will continue for many, many years to come.
America will remain one of the two most important governments, with or without USAID. Look, it's the United States and it's China. When you eliminate USAID, when you eliminate development from that balance, it tilts it slightly more so towards China.
Where soft power stands in Trump's view of his quiver of arrows is interesting, right? Right now, there's very little evidence that it's very high on his priority list. He's using very much hard power instruments to get what he wants. I think Trump's belief is that the United States is the greatest country on earth, and by definition is relevant.
Right now, the aid freeze is being challenged as unconstitutional. As the legal battle plays out in the corridors of American courts, across Southeast Asia, developmental groups must consider what lies in their futures.
For sure, may magandang reason si President Trump for the freeze nito. Pero I hope makita niya yung mga inspiring story na nakikreate ng mga tulong nila. So, kung ititigil niya yung tulong nito, parang tinitigil rin ng tulong ng mga Amerikano.